In the year 1206, at the banks of the Onon River, a man was proclaimed a king. But Genghis Khan did not just intend to rule men. He intended to own their souls through the currency of fear. Most conquerors build monuments to their glory. The Mongols built pyramids out of human bone. They understood a dark truth that the world had forgotten. A sword can kill a man, but the reputation of that sword can paralyze an entire continent. To face the Mongol army was to face an inevitability, a force that treated slaughter like a science and mercy like a mistake. This is not just a history of conquest. This is a manual on how the medieval world was broken, reshaped, and silenced. The Great Khan's most lethal weapon was never made of steel. It was made of whispers. When the Mongolian tribes united in 1206, the world saw a nomadic army on horseback. Genghis Khan saw something else, a blank canvas of human psychology. He realized that a city that surrenders in terror saves more Mongol arrows than a city taken by force. Thus began the era of the masterful manipulation. His strategy was simple yet devastating. He did not just attack cities. He attacked the idea of resistance. Before his horses even touched the horizon of a new territory, his agents were already there. These were the shadow merchants, spies, informants, and diplomats who traveled the Silk Road not to sell silk, but to sell dread. They circulated rumors that the Mongol horde numbered in the millions. They spoke of warriors who could shoot a bird from the sky while riding at full gallop, and men who drank the blood of their enemies to gain their strength. By the time the actual army arrived, the enemy's spirit was already hollowed out. The Khan's genius lay in the calculus of fear. He understood that perception is reality. If a city resisted, it was not merely defeated, it was erased from the map. He would deliberately allow a handful of survivors to escape. These broken, traumatized refugees were his primary messengers. They fled to the next city, carrying horrific tales of blood-soaked streets and hills made of heads. As the Roman strategist Sun Tzu once wrote, "Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting." Genghis Khan took this philosophy and turned it into a blood-soaked reality. His empire eventually stretched from the Pacific to the gates of Europe, but the foundation was laid in these early psychological strikes. He turned fear into a physical weight. In the campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire, the speed of his intelligence network, the YAM system, allowed information to travel faster than any message in human history. This speed meant that the Khan knew of a rebellion before the rebels had even finished their planning. To the medieval mind, this wasn't just military skill, it was dark magic. The Mongol protocol was a cycle of observation and annihilation. They would watch a target, learn its weaknesses, and then strike with a brutality so sudden that it left the survivors in a state of mass hysteria. The world was about to learn that, under the rule of the Khan, peace was not something you negotiated. Peace was the silence that followed a massacre. The atmosphere of the 13th century began to change. The air grew heavy with the smell of smoke and the weight of a name that made kings tremble in their stone palaces. Genghis Khan had arrived, and he brought with him the end of the world as they knew it. Stay with us till the end for valuable insight. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. When the Mongol horses stood before a city, the choice was never about victory or defeat. It was about existence or erasure. Genghis Khan's military philosophy moved beyond the battlefield. It became a clinical process of human harvesting. To the Mongols, a city was not a collection of homes and families. It was a resource to be stripped or a problem to be solved. This was the arithmetic of the grave. The process of systematic elimination was conducted with the chilling precision of a ledger. After a city fell, the population was marched outside the walls into the open field. There, the sorting of the damned began. Engineers, weavers, and smiths, those with skills that could serve the empire, were separated and sent back to Mongolia in chains. The rest? They were divided into groups of 10 or 20. Each Mongol soldier was given a quota, a specific number of souls to harvest before the sun went down. There was no passion in the killing. There was only the steady, rhythmic work of the blade. At the city of Nishaper, this systematic approach reached a peak of horror. Following the death of the Khan's son-in-law, the order was not just for a massacre, but for total biological liquidation. The Mongols did not just kill the men. They killed the women, the children, the infants in their cradles, and even the dogs and cats in the street. They built separate pyramids of skulls, one for men, one for women, and one for children, to ensure that the message of their vengeance was visually undeniable. The Persian historian Juwayni noted that they counted corpses like merchants count coins. This was the Mongol protocol. It was designed to turn a physical location into a psychological void. The Khan understood that the most effective way to rule a continent was to make the cost of rebellion so high that the human mind could not even contemplate it. This wasn't chaotic violence. It was state-sponsored terror used as a governing tool. They used the terror of the few to control the millions. The Mongols also pioneered the use of human shields on a scale never before seen. Captured prisoners from one city were forced to march in the front ranks of the attack on the next city. These doomed souls were forced to carry the siege ladders and fill the moats with their own bodies. It was a masterpiece of psychological cruelty. Defenders on the walls were forced to shoot their own kin, their own neighbors, to stop the Mongol advance. The moral trauma of this act often broke a city's defense faster than any catapult. By the time the Mongol warriors reached the walls, the defenders were often too paralyzed by grief and horror to lift their swords. The atmosphere of war had shifted from a test of strength to a descent into madness. As the Mongol shadow deepened over Central Asia, the methods of control shifted from the blade to the environment itself. The Khan did not just use the earth as a battlefield. He used it as a tool for psychological trauma. This was nowhere more evident than in the creation of what would become a legend of horror, the Maali Balai, or the City of Sorrow. When resistance was met with exceptional defiance, the Mongols responded with biological eradication. In the wake of an uprising, the punishment was often collective and absolute. This led to the chilling engineering of the mass grave. Historical records describe scenes where entire populations were forced into deep trenches or valleys. But the Mongols did not simply bury them. They applied a technique of settling the earth. Soldiers would pour massive quantities of water over the freshly turned soil where thousands had been buried alive. The water served a clinical purpose. It caused the earth to settle and compact faster, ensuring that no air pockets remained and that the weight of the mud would crush the last breath out of the victims. 4 days afterward, the ground itself seemed to move and groan as the earth tightened its grip. This site became known in local folklore as the Valley of Screams. It was a place where the geography was permanently stained by the memory of the massacre. The message was unmistakable. The Khan's reach extended even beneath the soil. This was the Great Terror, a policy of punitive expeditions designed to act as a viral warning system. When a city like Herat rebelled in 1229, the response was a masterclass in total infrastructure deconstruction. the Khan's successor, Ogodai, did not just want to kill the rebels. He wanted to unmake the city. Mongol engineers were ordered to dismantle the city brick by brick. This was not the heat of battle. It was a slow, methodical erasure. Every home, every library, and every irrigation system was systematically destroyed. The irrigation systems, the lifeblood of these desert regions, were a primary target. By salting the fields and filling the ancient qanats, underground water channels, with debris and carcasses, the Mongols ensured that the land could not support human life for a century. They weren't just killing the current generation, they were executing the future. The Persian scholar Al-Jawani wrote that they made the learned eat their own words, as libraries were burned and the ashes thrown into the rivers. The city of Herat, once a jewel of 1 million people, was reduced to a wasteland where only 40 survivors were reportedly left to haunt the ruins. The world watched as the Mongols turned thriving civilizations into silent, dust-choked graveyards. The Mongol Empire did not just function on fear. It functioned on the meticulous recording of fear. To Genghis Khan, a massacre was only effective if its details were accurately reported to the next target. This gave birth to a dark administrative process, the arithmetic of the grave. The Mongols were perhaps history's first practitioners of strategic paralysis through data. When a city fell, the Mongol officers, known as daragachi, did not just oversee the looting, they oversaw the census of the dead. Following the fall of Merv, the population was divided into precise groups. Every soldier was assigned a quota of victims, sometimes as many as 50 per warrior. To ensure the numbers were accurate, the soldiers were often required to produce a physical token for every person killed, such as an ear or a finger, which were then collected in massive bags and counted by the Khan's scribes. These were not just numbers, they were a psychological currency. The Mongols would then send tokens of the end to neighboring provinces. Imagine a city governor receiving a diplomat who carries no gold or silk, but instead a heavy burlap sack. When opened, it spills out the ears of 1,000 neighboring citizens. Or perhaps a bag containing the blood-soaked toys of children from a city that thought its walls were impenetrable. This was the communication of the void. It signaled to the recipient that the Mongol war machine was not an army of men, but a force of nature that dealt in absolute, cold-blooded totals. This strategy created a phenomenon known as mass hysteria. The linguistic DNA of the Mongol era shows that the mere rumor of the Khan's approach could kill a city's defense before a single arrow was fired. Chroniclers recorded instances where a single Mongol warrior could enter a village of hundreds and execute them one by one, and not a single soul would lift a hand to resist. They were paralyzed by the narrative. The reputation of the Mongols had become a physical cage. The Hungarian chronicler Rogerius wrote that the terror of the Mongols ran faster than their horses. This was by design. By weaponizing the stories of their atrocities, the Mongols ensured that their enemies did the work of surrendering for them. They understood that the mind is its own worst enemy when faced with the unprecedented. They turned the medieval world's sense of order upside down, replacing the laws of chivalry and siegecraft with a singular, terrifying law: compliance or extinction. There was no middle ground, no negotiation, and, most importantly, no escape from the math of the Khan. If the common people were the harvest, the ruling elite were the targets of a much more refined cruelty. Genghis Khan was not content with merely killing kings. He sought to dismantle the very concept of nobility. This was the systematic decapitation of hierarchy. The Khan understood that a people without leaders are a flock without a shepherd, and he acted as the surgeon of sovereigns, to remove the head of every society he touched. When a kingdom was marked for conquest, the Mongol officers carried black lists, detailed records of the aristocratic families, their ranks, and their influence. This was a methodical deconstruction. In the fall of the Jin dynasty, the imperial court was not simply executed in a chaotic massacre. It was a ritualized stripping of status. High-ranking officials were forced to watch as their ancestral tablets, the most sacred symbols of their family history, were smashed and used as floorboards for Mongol tents. The message was clear: your history is now our carpet. The Mongols also practiced the humiliation of blood. For those of royal descent, the Mongols often avoided spilling royal blood on the ground, but not out of respect. It was a dark superstition. Instead, they would wrap kings and princes in thick felt carpets and stomp them to death with horses or suffocate them. This allowed the Mongols to claim they had respected the sanctity of royal blood while simultaneously inflicting a death that was terrifyingly intimate and degrading. They turned the privilege of royalty into a death sentence of claustrophobic horror. One of the most effective tools in this aristocratic elimination was the game of kingdoms. In territories like Georgia, captured nobles were forced to compete against one another in humiliating tasks. The losers were executed, and the winners were forced to act as the executioners of their own peers. This destroyed the noble solidarity that held kingdoms together. By the time the Mongols officially took control, the surviving elites were so broken, so compromised by their own actions, that they could never again command the respect of their people. This was identity liquidation. The Mongols melted down royal seals and turned them into horsebit. They took ceremonial robes and forced the former owners to wear them backward while cleaning stables. The Khitan historian Li Xin Chuan recorded that the Mongols did not just kill nobles, they killed nobility itself. They ensured that the memory of a king was not one of glory, but of a broken man crawling in the dust. By erasing the symbols of power, the Khan ensured that there would be no ghosts of the old regime to haunt his new world order. The vacuum left behind was filled with only one name: Genghis. The final stage of the Mongol strategy was not an act of violence, but the creation of a permanent psychological echo. After the cities were dismantled, the elites erased, and the valleys filled, Genghis Khan established a world where the memory of his brutality became the most effective form of governance. This was the Pax Mongolica through trauma, a peace born not from consent, but from the absolute absence of the will to resist. By the mid-13th century, the linguistic DNA of the world had changed. Mothers in distant lands, who had never seen a Mongol horse, would quiet their crying children by whispering that the Mongols were coming. The terror had become generational. It was no longer a military threat. It was a cultural haunting. Historians note that during the later invasions of Europe, entire Hungarian and Polish towns would burn their own crops and flee into the mountains upon the mere rumor of a Mongol scout. The terror of the Khan moved faster than his messengers. This legacy created a strategic paralysis that lasted for centuries. The Mongol approach to warfare, the systematic use of terror, the technological innovation of siegecraft, and the total destruction of economic infrastructure became the blueprint for future conquerors. From Timur to the military theorists of the Ottoman Empire, the world studied the arithmetic of the Khan. They learned that fear is a more potent weapon than any sword because it requires no maintenance and never grows dull. The Ottoman theorist Nasu Almatrai wrote in 1520 that the Mongols taught the world that fear is the ultimate governor. The physical evidence of this era still speaks from the earth. In 2019, archaeological excavations near the ancient Mongol capital of Karakorum uncovered mass graves where victims were arranged in concentric circles, a final, ritualistic display of the order of death. These sites serve as a grim confirmation of the architecture of atrocity that underpinned the largest contiguous empire in history. The Mongols did not just build an empire, they built a new reality where the cost of rebellion was total extinction. As the Persian historian Juwayni famously concluded, the Mongols arrived like a storm and left like a vacuum. They came, they sapped, they burnt, they slew, they plundered, and they departed. But they left behind a world that was forever changed. The Silk Roads were safe, trade flourished, and the Mongol peace reigned, but it was a peace bought with the blood of millions and maintained by the chilling silence of those too terrified to speak. The story of Genghis Khan is the story of how one man realized that if you break the world thoroughly enough, the pieces will eventually stop fighting back. If you enjoy dark, untold history, subscribe because we uncover what others won't.